everyone. You're listening to The Future of Food Is You, a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. I'm your host, Abena Anim-Somuah, and each week I talk to emerging talents in the food world, and they share what they're up to, as well as their dreams and predictions for what's ahead. As for me, I'm the founder of The Eden Place, a community that's all about gathering people intentionally around food. I love this new generation of chefs, bakers, and creatives making their way in the world of food, drink, media, and tech. Today's guest is Anicia Anya, founder of Kids Table here in New York City. Kids Table is a subscription-based meal company with the goal of creating adventurous eaters through chef-prepared and nutritionist-backed meals. Anicia and I talk about the way food showed up through her Nigerian-American upbringing, why she decided to go to culinary school, the power of community in accelerating her business, and what she believes to be the future of feeding kids in America. Thank you to Kerrygold and Walmart for supporting today's show. Kerrygold is delicious all-natural butter and cheese made with milk from Irish grass-fed cows raised on small, family-run Irish dairy farms. Kerrygold's farming families pass their craft and knowledge from generation to generation. This traditional approach is the reason for the rich taste of Kerrygold. You can enjoy delicious sliced or shredded Kerrygold cheddar cheese, available in mild or savory flavors. The shredded cheddar is perfect for those who love making mac and cheese. And now that grilling season is here, the cheddar slices will take any burger or veggie burger up a notch. There's also Kerrygold's classic salted butter in the gold foil. It's perfect for slathering on corn on the cob, always a summer fave. And the unsalted butter in the silver foil is an absolute must if you're turning sweet summer strawberries into strawberry shortcake. Visit KerrygoldUSA.com to find the Kerrygold retailer nearest you and lots of great recipes. Thank you to everyone who joined us in Atlanta for our first live podcast event. It was so great meeting you, and I loved learning so much about the Atlanta food scene. Atlanta is such a special place, and I can't wait to come back. Also, thanks to our friends at Star Provisions for all the beautiful snacks and drinks. Check out the photos on our Instagram account, @CherryBomb, and stay tuned for news about future tour stops. Now, let's check in with today's guest. Anicia, thanks so much for joining us on the Future of Food Is You podcast.
I am so excited to be here and chat with you.
So just to get things started, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and how food showed up?
My family's from Nigeria, so I grew up in a Nigerian and American household. Growing up, we ate mostly Nigerian food, but we kind of dabbled in American food a little bit. I was always kind of a little bit ashamed of the fact that, we only ate Nigerian food. And it's funny now because that is the food that I prefer. Now as an adult, I'm like, yes, I would love a bowl of jollof. I would love rice and stew. But, growing up, it was I want a Lunchable. I want pizza. I want a Hot Pocket. And my dad was like, no, we have rice.
There's food at home.
There's food at home. Also, my grandmother owned a market and a restaurant in Nigeria. So we would oftentimes go to Lagos in the summers when we didn't have school, and we would spend time in her market. Not necessarily in the restaurant, but we would kind of see the ins and outs of the restaurant and how things were going and how things were facilitating and kind of how food was made and how things went from the market to the restaurant, which was really, really cool. But I think my entire childhood and my whole life, I've always loved food. I've always gravitated towards food. I taught myself how to cook at a very early age. It was always a thing as a kid. I was always very curious about what's in the kitchen, what's at the grocery store. Food kind of showed up in all different ways in my childhood, whether it was at home, eating our traditional Nigerian foods, or when we were in Nigeria, or just me exploring American food because we didn't actually make it at home.
So other than jollof rice and stew, what were some other traditional Nigerian foods that you had?
We had egusi soup, okra, we had mai, we had plantain. It's not really a traditional Nigerian food, but that's something.
It's everywhere on the continent.
It's everywhere on the continent. I love breakfast. That is a meal that I will not miss, despite everyone on this whole intermittent fasting or I don't eat breakfast journey. Girl, we eat breakfast. So in Nigeria, we have this thing called egg sauce. And it's kind of our version of a scramble. It's eggs mixed with tomatoes and peppers, usually a Scotch bonnet, onions. Sometimes you put a little Maggi in there. And you slowly scramble it. And you put stew on top. And you eat it with a side of yams or plantain. And it hits. It hits.
That's amazing.
It really does.
I feel like my family's from Ghana, and I feel like there's something very similar. We're like cousins.
Yeah,
or sisters, not cousins.
Yes,
yeah.
the food is very, very similar.
Yeah.
Our jollof is still better, but
I mean, we're not going to fight on the podcast. Keep things civil. For those of you who are listening, Ghanaians and Nigerians are in a very heated but friendly debate over who has the best jollof. So, anyways, I know we can sit here and talk about jollof all day, but before you really dove into food, you went to college. Yep. Was food still showing up and playing a role there?
Yeah, so I think, in college, we always had cafeteria food, and I lived on campus for most of the part, but we would always venture off campus. And when I lived at home for a while, I would still try out new restaurants and things like that in the neighborhood. I think food was always a part of my life, and I didn't really have the college food diet of pizza and ramen noodles. Like, I wanted food. I wanted real food and, like, real meals, and I think that was a challenge for me in college because, as a college student, you really can't afford to eat all different types of food or eat a variety. And then also there's just this kind of, like, stereotype, like, this is what college kids eat because, they just left home and they don't know really how to cook. So they tend to go towards things that are microwavable. And I was like, girl, I can cook. Like let me cook. And so I would make things in my dorm room sometimes, and if I couldn't make them, I would venture out to go get them.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about a dish that you made back then that was like your staple or the one that you felt like you got a really good gist of?
I think tacos. Tacos are it was a really easy dish to make, and you just eat like tortilla, some type of protein, and the toppings are all fresh and raw usually, either like it's lettuce, tomato, or salsa, cilantro, or like, jalapenos, lime. I mean, I wasn't going that extravagant in college, but it was really simple to make. And then again, like breakfast is my thing, and so it's always nice to make a quick omelet or some type of like hash or something like that.
That's amazing. And so you go off and work in tech, and yet you decide to come back to food again. So what was the moment that you decided that food was going to be your core passion and the thing that you were working on full time?
I would honestly say food as a full-time job kind of fell into my lap. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have thought you were crazy. Like, a chef? What? Owning a food business? That sounds crazy to me. Especially growing up in a Nigerian household, especially coming from a very traditional educational background where it's like, you should get a corporate job or you should get a job that has some sort of stability, like insurance and a 401k and things like that. So, I've kind of thought of food as like a passion or hobby for a while. And after working in tech for so long, I just didn't really see the passion in tech. And I kind of was just like, I like my job, I like the people I'm working with, but I don't really have a passion for this. And food was something that always like lit me up. And I decided to quit my job, and I actually didn't really have a plan. I was like, maybe I'll go back to school. Maybe I will go get another corporate job or another tech job. Maybe I'll work at a tech food company to kind of align those interests. While I was in this whole realm of what's next, I became a full-time nanny, and that kind of really set it off. And I was working for all these different families all over New York City. I was feeding kids. We were going all around the city, trying all these new restaurants on mom and dad's dollar. And a lot of the families I worked with were high net worth families, high profile families, celebrities, CEOs, and they had chefs themselves. They had chefs that worked in the home. And I think that was the point where I was like, wow, this is a job. I would sometimes fill in for chefs if they were sick, and I think there was one moment where a family, their chef was sick, and it was Thanksgiving dinner, and they were like...
That's the biggest meal of the year?
That's the biggest meal of the year, and they were like, Anicia, we really need you to help out. And I was like, what? There's no way that I'm going to be able to execute a Thanksgiving dinner professionally. I did some research, I did some work, I talked to their chef, I talked to other chefs, and we did it, and I was like, I think I could do this. I think I could do this for work. And I started kind of just networking with chefs, whether they were private chefs or restaurant chefs, whether they were pop-up chefs, just chatting with them about their experiences, what they do, and what their day-to-day life was. Sophia Rowe was one of the first chefs that I DM'd, and
she's amazing.
She's phenomenal. And she was like, let's have coffee. We had coffee. She was like, these are the knives that you need. These are the programs that you can sign up for. These are different avenues that you can go in. And I could see the longevity in it, whereas I didn't see that in tech. I think that's when I realized this is something that I want to do. And I left that coffee with Sophia, and I left all those conversations that week. I signed up for culinary school, and
That's amazing.
that was it. The rest is history.
Yeah, so you end up going to the Institution of Culinary Education, also known as ICE. Were there any classes or memories that you had that really made you proud of the decision that you in deciding to go there?
I think the entire process, I think that it just made it more official. Through my conversations with other chefs, they were like, you don't need to go there.
Totally.
Like, you don't need to do this. Yeah. As a home cook, you can learn a lot. There are a lot of very talented and professional home cooks that have went on to open multiple restaurants, Michelin star restaurants, award-winning pop-ups. But I think I just still kind of wanted the techniques and to see the techniques in a professional form. I think when you're at home, it's you chop the way that you chop, you braise the way that you braise. But it was so interesting and cool for me to see the official way, or, the French way, the way that chefs are taught traditionally for years. This is how they've been taught to braise. This is how they've been taught to fry or saute. These are the different terms, like mise en place. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
People are throwing around mise en place. I was like, what is that? You know how to hold a knife when you're passing through people. There's different, it was just a rites of passage almost.
Totally.
You kind of learned these different ways that chefs move, the way that chefs work, the way that they clean their stations, the way that they were able to work efficiently. And I think, I was able to take those tools with me, even though I didn't go the full restaurant route full time. I still use these things to this day.
After you graduated from culinary school, what do you end up doing?
So after culinary school, I staged at a couple different restaurants, and I worked at a couple different restaurants. Not necessarily long term. I would work for a couple months at a time just to kind of learn more about different recipes, different ingredients, different types of sourcing. And it was really important for me to work under other chefs. I knew, as a chef, I didn't know it all. I didn't have everything in me, and I think it was really cool for me to go into these restaurants and learn more about them. I was at Samisa for a little bit. I went to Gentleman Farmer, Petite Paulette in Brooklyn, Westbourne in the West Village. And it was really cool just to see how the different restaurants were run and the different specialties they had. And then also it was really cool for me to see from a business perspective, because I think I kind of always knew that I wanted to own my own business. Maybe not a restaurant, but something in the food world. And so it was cool to see how these entrepreneurs were able to run a food business in New York City and how they were able to interact with staff and things like that.
For sure. Just to backtrack a little bit, can you tell our audience what staging is? I feel like it's one of those terms that gets thrown around, but people really don't know what it means. Like you with mise en place at one point.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Staging is essentially, it can mean two different things. So sometimes some chefs see staging as an interview process. So it's a working interview where you'll work in a restaurant for maybe a weekend, and you'll do a brunch shift, a dinner shift, and maybe an in-between shift. Or it can be a long-term situation where it's more of an internship where you're working for weeks or months at a time under a chef to facilitate the hot station, cold station, line, front of house, back of house, and you can kind of see how the restaurant is running. If you're going into the Michelin star world, it's a lot more specialized, and so you can be a saucier where you're working with just sauces, or you can be at the cold station where you're just cold, or produce where it's just produce and you're just picking herbs, things like that.
Totally.
So it can be more specialized depending on what you want to do. If you want to make your own sauce one day, that's a great way to learn, is stage at a restaurant as a saucier. Or if you want to learn more about farming or growing your own herbs and vegetables, that could also be cool too.
I mean, a chef is not just a chef. A chef is probably an amalgamation of all different specialties. But there are some people who are so incredibly talented in one part that helps this moving machine work.
You also don't have to go to culinary school to stage. Depending on the connections you have, or if you have a restaurant in your local neighborhood and you know the chef or you're a regular there, maybe you want to learn a technique or how they make a certain thing, you can talk to the chef or the owner about coming in for the day. They may make sure that you have some sort of food certification or some sort of workers' comp insurance to make sure that they're safe. Chefs are always looking for those because it's more hands in the kitchen, more help.
Yeah.
Even if it's just for a day or a week.
That's amazing. But what I think is awesome, too, is you worked in restaurants, but you still had this itch to go back to the private chef life. I feel like private chefs in the last couple of years, I think because of social media, we've been open into the eyes of what it's like to make food for other people while incorporating your flavors and stuff. So what is the scope of being a private chef in New York City?
It's a lot. Like, I mean, not that it's a lot. It's very interesting because I'm very happy to see private chefs getting the flowers and getting the recognition, getting their brand partnerships, and getting kind of in front, because I think for so long, people kind of frowned upon private chefs, and they were kind of like, you cook for rich people. It just wasn't seen as like a real thing. When I tell people that I'm a chef, the first question is, what restaurant do you work at? It was always this, like, awkward moment where it's like, oh, I don't work at a restaurant. And they're like, so do you have a catering company or do you do weddings? And you're like, no, not really. And it was always this awkward conversation. And I think the chef world has this egocentric thing about it where it's like, if you're not working at a Michelin star restaurant or one of the hottest restaurants in the city, then, like, you're not a chef.
Yeah.
You're a cook, or you maybe do this for fun or do this for a hobby. And I think for years that was like our lives as a private chef. No one really saw us as chefs. No one really saw us as professionals or people that knew how to cook and knew how to create these delicious meals and these really cool experiences through food. So I'm very happy to see that private chefs are getting that recognition now. It's a crazy world. I mean, you're essentially running a restaurant in someone's home. Literally, you're feeding them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Depending on your clientele, like, you can either work for a family full-time, where you're responsible for all the culinary services, whether it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, whether it's meal prep, whether it's making snacks for the kids, dinner parties, you know, in their garden or their vacation home. You can work like that as a private chef. You can also work freelance as a private chef, where you're taking multiple clients at a time, whether you have a couple meal prep clients, a couple dinner party clients, a couple one-off brand dinners and things like that. So there's just kind of a variety of ways that you can facilitate the role of a private chef. But again, there's no front or back of house. There's no line cook. There's no dishwasher. There's no person planning your menus. It's you. There's no one like ordering your groceries or like figuring that out for you, sourcing. It's you are doing the sourcing, you're doing the menu planning, you are cooking, you are serving, you're doing the cleanup, and you're preparing for the next service.
Yeah.
Like in a restaurant.
That's amazing. Do you think there's a type of person that would fit the bill? Like, let's say if someone's listening now and they're wanting to explore, maybe they love to cook for others, they love to cook for friends, but culinary school is probably too expensive or not something that's viable.
Yeah.
Like, which types of people do you think fit the private chef bill? Because not everyone is going to be an executive chef. Not everyone's going to be a pastry chef. So,
yeah, I think as a private chef, you do have to be resilient. You also have to be very personable because you are working in someone's home. And you also have to have a very, very, very thick skin because you know, you're not making the same menu every day. You're making new menus all the time. Sometimes it's the client is telling you what to make. And so you have to be able to take that and receive that. Whereas like in a restaurant, you can't go to a restaurant and just go to the back and be like, you know what? I actually want that. Like, that doesn't happen, you know? You order off of a menu, and I think you also don't really see the feedback from the customers. I mean, you may...
Unless it's bad, or unless it's amazing.
It's bad or amazing. I mean, and even then, you see it maybe on a Yelp review, or maybe from the restaurant owner or something like that. But even then, because restaurants have so much traffic, and so, unless it's like something that's detrimental, you don't really see it. In the private chef world, your feedback is given to you as soon as that plate hits the table, every single time. And you're in someone's home, remember? So it's not like you can go to the back of the kitchen or you can leave or whatever. You don't have to see this customer. You're putting the plate on the table and you're watching them eat and you're receiving the feedback there, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of take that, like, with a smile on your face. The other thing is, I think I, like, joke with people about it, and I always tell people, like, private chef is 90% people management, 10% cooking. The cooking part is easy.
Yeah.
That's easy. It's the managing of the people, their lives, their lifestyles, their different diets, the requests, the changes, the quick changes that they make overnight. I have a dinner party next week, and it was originally supposed to be 10 people. My client is like, you know what, I sent an invite for 40 people. And I'm like, girl, I've already started planning the menu. Like, you know, but it's like you have to be quick.
Yeah.
You know, whereas in a restaurant, you can 86 something and it's done.
Yeah. For those of you listening, 86 means that something is sold out.
I keep using the
No, I love it. I love restaurant jargon. It's something that I've been fascinated with. So I feel like it's great to learn. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Today's show is presented by Walmart, the world's largest retailer. So many people in this country depend on Walmart for its groceries and trust Walmart to have high-quality food at affordable prices. That sounds like the future to me and the present. Walmart is always listening to its customers and values the feedback received about new products and flavors. To help meet and exceed customer expectations, Walmart employs a range of experts, like classically trained chefs, in vital roles within the company. I love knowing that. Another thing I love about Walmart is how many interesting new food brands can be found there. Female and Black-owned brands in particular, such as Partake Foods, vegan and gluten-free cookies, baking mixes, and snack packs founded by Denise Woodard. And Iya Foods, which has gluten-free baking mixes, spice mixes, and whole food powders, and was started by Toyin Kolawole. If you're a founder of a CPG brand and would like to work with Walmart, you need to know about Walmart's Open Call. 2023 will be the 10th anniversary of Walmart's Open Call event. It's an exciting and unique opportunity for entrepreneurs to meet face-to-face with Walmart merchants at the largest sourcing event in the United States. This year's Open Call will be in Bentonville, Arkansas, on October 24th and 25th. Registration starts this July. If you are a future retail star, stay tuned for more details. Let's talk more about your current project, which is so exciting. So you are the founder and CEO of Kids Table.
Yeah, so Kids Table, we are an organic and globally inspired kids meal line. We launched in New York City. We launched as a local meal delivery company, and we are currently in the process of pivoting into retail to
That's amazing.
A CPG brand. So that's very, very exciting. I launched Kids Table with a mission to just truly change the way that we think about kids' food and offer diversity, inclusion, more nutrition. I think there is a huge gap in the food world when it comes to kids, and I think a lot of manufacturers, they've been able to kind of put good products on the market, but still not with kids and parents in mind. It's a lot of things for grown-ups. And then for kids, they kind of just shove these snacks or pouches or applesauce or chicken tenders, mac and cheese. And I think right now our society is changing when it comes to food. Right now a lot of people are now learning about where their food comes from, and they're trying new foods from different nationalities. And I think we've progressed as adults when it comes to food. Adults weren't eating kale Caesar salads and like anchovy dressings and ordering Indian takeout and things. That wasn't a thing in the 90s or the early 2000s. I think now it's very much so important to adults to eat a variety, whether it's nutrition or in like taste and flavor. And I think now as we start to have kids, we want that for our kids too. However, the market doesn't really meet that yet. And so in the pandemic, as a private chef, I was working for a lot of different families, and I would kind of see the struggles and the pain points when it came to feeding kids. And the biggest thing, parents were always like, my kid's so picky, my kid doesn't want to try these new different things. We're traveling, and my kid won't eat the food when we're traveling. And it was just really hard for parents to get delicious, nutritious food on the table or in the lunchbox. And then also that represented other cultures. I think if you look at a classroom today, the classrooms are filled with multicultural families. And I think if you even go further and you start looking at a census, most families today are multicultural families. And so we need food to reflect that. In the pandemic, I kind of just saw there wasn't anyone doing it. Why not start it?
Yeah.
And, I wanted to take all of my different passions. I had a career working in childcare. I transitioned to this culinary job. I came from tech, and I was like, how do I combine all of these things together? Here came this startup, Kids Table.
I'm really curious, how do you think about recipe development? Because the thing about feeding kids is nutrition is so important to feed kids. You're not just feeding a kid an apple, you're not just feeding a kid an orange, you're feeding them vitamin C, folic acid, all those types of things. So what sort of research are you doing to maintain that balance between food that's delicious, but also that's nutritious and parents feel like they're getting a good return on their investment.
While I was in childcare, I learned a lot about nutrition when it came to adolescents and children, whether it was infants to toddlers and toddlers to actual kids, kids to teenagers. It was really fun to kind of learn what those needs were and implement that in the food. And I live in this like Brooklyn bubble where the stereotypical Brooklyn mom, they're obsessed with nutrition and, feeding their kids good food. And so it was really cool to learn from these moms and to see like what they wanted to see in other foods. Because these moms were like, they were making the products. There was no kids' table then. So they were making these things for their kids. As I went on to becoming a private chef and testing all these different recipes, I was able to implement that into the chef world. And I think while launching Kids Table, I then reached out to a couple different pediatricians, some infant feeding specialists, just to really hone in on what are the nutrients that kids actually need. Because, there's a lot of buzzwords when it comes to food. People love putting buzz things on food. And those things are not necessarily something that we need.
Totally.
It's just like something fun and trendy. So after talking with different types of infant feeding specialists, it was really cool to like learn from them. I kind of took that and then implemented that into the recipes. I also think my style of cooking is usually very nutrient forward. And so it wasn't really a big jump for me to make the food nutritious and taste good. I think I've always done that myself. As someone who has grown up and who has struggled with chronic illness, that's something that I've always had to do.
Yeah.
And then working with private clients, they always wanted the best food possible, but make sure it tastes good. And so it was like kind of a breeze.
Yeah, that's so awesome. When you talk to these professionals, what are 3 or 4 learnings that really stuck out to you in terms of how to think about feeding kids things that are good, but also taste good?
It's funny, a lot of nutritionists had kind of mentioned that like the biggest thing that kids need are just fat, fiber, and like their top vitamins like vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin B. And if you're able to implement that, and a lot of ingredients have those different vitamins and minerals in them. And then, I also learned that it's kind of case by case. Most kids have their basic needs. I think, unfortunately, the media just drives information in you. And so then you're like, oh, my God, my kid needs a different type of probiotic, or my kid needs extra vitamin C or extra of that. My kid's getting sick every day. We need to start feeding them more vitamin C. And it's like kids are tricky. Like they go through stages and different like growth spurts. You kind of have to just like let it happen unless there's something that's actually chronic that's happening or there's an actual deficiency happening. It's funny because kids are the least deficient. I think as adults, we are a lot more deficient than kids. Kids actually have most of their like basic needs, whether it's through their food, because they're actually eating all their meals a day and they're not under so much stress. And
there's also structure around their lives.
Yeah,
there's school, there's recess, there's all these other things too.
Yeah, there's so many things.
As you were developing the meals and stuff, how did you work with kids and families to get the feedback to keep making awesome meals? Did you have a panel of kids that you're like, okay, let me find the pickiest kids in New York City and see what they're into? Or how did that work?
So when I was thinking about this business, I reached out to families that I had previously worked for, and I was like, hey, like I'm thinking about launching this kids meal line. Would you want to like test this idea out with me? And they're like, yeah, sure. I kind of chose the families where I knew some of their kids were picky or like they had different age kids. Like I worked with families who had a toddler, a school-age kid, and then maybe a baby. So like they're feeding multiple different ages. And how could that work, Or like, families who had kids who actually did have chronic illness, whether it was like diabetes or families whose kids had allergies. So I kind of was strategic about the families that I did pick. Luckily, I had a roster, after being in childcare, being a private chef. I'd worked with hundreds of families before. And so I had reached out to them. They let me test on them. And so for about 6 months, every week I was dropping off food. I was going on different play dates with moms. I was going to mom groups. I was showing up at playgrounds.
That's amazing.
To really get feedback. And kids are honest. Like they're very, very
They're not going to lie.
They're not going to lie. I think the trickiest part of Kids Table is, you're selling to parents, but your consumer is a child. And so that's very, very different. You have to be able to create a product that parents feel proud to feed their kids. They feel good about buying it. But then also it has to taste good to the child. And I think, again, when you go back to the market, there are a lot of products that like they pop off the shelves because they're selling to parents. But then when their kid eats it, they're like, what is this multi-nut date bar with no sugar, no whatever. It's no taste, no flavor. And it's funny because I look at those products, I'm like, yeah, they were only thinking about the parents.
Yeah. I think it's so impressive that you're trying to create this wholesome, approachable brand, but also really, really paying attention to what you're feeding kids and making sure that these are whole foods, these are natural foods that kids can enjoy.
Yeah, and essentially when I was developing the recipes for Kids Table, I wanted parents to see it as like, this is something I would eat too, because, you know, that's kind of the messaging or like the questioning that you ask yourself is, would I eat this? If you won't eat it, why would you feed it to your kid?
1,000%.
And so I wanted to create a product that's like, oh, you would eat it? Okay, then you would feed it to your kid. It's kind of funny. We have a lot of parents that order extra food for themselves, or like moms that use our za'atar chicken tenders and they make salads or they make sandwiches or chicken parmesan. And they're like, my kid actually hated this, but I loved it, so I kept ordering it. And it's like really great because it's like essentially we want the kids' table to be this like all-inclusive place where like everyone can sit at and everyone can eat. And it's not just quote-unquote kids' food.
That's so amazing and that's so inspirational. How do you hope that Kids Table sparks a conversation or changes the standard for how, at least in America, people are thinking about kids and healthy eating habits?
You know, my biggest mission, again, with Kids Table is just to kind of change the way that we talk about kids' food. And I just really hope that adults start to see that kids' food is food. It's our food. And this kid is eventually going to turn 10 and then 16 and then 20 and then 21. And how do we want that to look? Do you still want them to be eating mac and cheese when they're 32? Like, no. So, like, mac and cheese is really good. Yeah, of course. But as the only meal that they're eating, you know, no. And so I think, you know, I really want parents to approach feeding kids as the way that they do other forms of parenting. When you're allowing your kid to walk, you know, you're not holding their hand the entire time. You're allowing them to take those footsteps and try different ways of getting up off the floor, or like pulling themselves up, or like making that next step. And that's kind of what I would like to see with food, is that parents actually allow their kids to try new foods and try new flavors. And I think a lot of the messaging is like, kids don't eat that, or kids won't order that. And I think you see that in restaurants. They have a separate menu because they don't think that kids would eat the things off the regular menu. And it's like, you know, I would love to see people start to see kids' food as just food.
We're huge manifestors on the podcast.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that you're transitioning into more of a CPG line, which you'll be seeing in retail, which we're very excited about. But are there particular projects or partnerships that you're hoping that will be a part of Kids Table in the next 5 to 10 years?
Launching into retail is very huge. We're launching regionally. So I would love...
Congratulations.
Thank you. I want to see Kids Table in the freezers of everyone's home. And I want to see it in kids' lunchboxes. I want parents to be talking about it. Eventually, 20 years down the line, if our country ever gets it together, I would love to see it as like an option for public school lunch. The other thing about Kids Table is I don't ever just want to be a brand that's just like, here's the food. I want to actually create like an actual experience for kids to be able to learn about the food and learn about where things come from and how it's made and how it smells and how it tastes and things like that. And I think, you know, I dream of a world where we have a kid-friendly cafe, or where we host classes and workshops, and we have a garden where kids can grow vegetables and they can come and pick up their CSA box, you know. I really dream of expanding the brand to be more experiential so that kids can actually experience the food and not just experience it by mom putting it in the lunchbox or dad grilling it or something like that.
I hope it all works out. And, you know, as a Black woman, I think it's so admirable that you are an entrepreneur, especially in an industry that Black women are still the minority when it comes to being business owners, but also are the ones that spend the most consumer dollars. So how do you feel like the food industry is supporting you, and how do you hope things are changing or staying the same as you're spending more and more time in it, both as an entrepreneur and as a chef and all these other amazing adventures that you're on?
Yes, I still think that the industry has a long way to go when it comes to supporting Black women, especially in the entrepreneurial space, especially in a startup space. I think if you look at most of the food businesses or food delivery programs, it's mostly still white-owned. I think community is something that has been really important to me, and I think throughout this process I've been able to lean on my community and my friends and family, and like they have communities. That has been something that's really helped me. I think I have made it a huge priority to build connections in the food space with other women of color chefs, not just Black women chefs, but other women of color, men of color, and just to kind of like connect with each other and kind of share each other's our pain points, our frustrations, and then also like our resources and share our wins and like really support each other. And that has been something that not only has helped the process, but it's also just like super inspiring to see, you know, like this weekend was a really big example of that, helping Jenna of Payla Kitchen at the bake sale, you know, supporting other Black women and just seeing like this wasn't a walk in the park for them to get here. You know, they don't come from money, they don't have huge investors, they don't have an entire staff working for them. You know, it was something that they worked really hard for. And so I think supporting each other is something that really, really helps. But I do think, yeah, we do have a long way to go. And I think support Black women all day.
Yeah, you know the vibes. Do you have any advice for any entrepreneurs or food professionals that are hoping to make a change? I feel like you've transitioned in so many ways and transitioned successfully.
Yeah.
What sort of grounds you, what advice has been grounding you as you've been making these decisions?
One thing that I learned early on is do the thing. Just do it. I think we all, like, we sit on our ideals and our aspirations and, you know, we do all this research and, you know, we want it to be perfect. We want to have the right branding, the right logo, the right packaging, the right website. And I think we just have to start. You know, you just have to start. You just have to do your thing and your community will show up. When I launched Kids Table, I was buying containers from the dollar store and I was printing stickers out at my neighbor's house, like, to kind of make it work. It's only been a year, you know, and it's like you can come a long way in a year. You know, we already have a huge partnership with Ipsa. We have a partnership with Lalo. We're now transitioning into retail. And, you know, I think back and it's like if I kept sitting on it, I wouldn't be here today. And I'm just, you know, I always advise people just do the thing and the rest will come. And just really believe in yourself and just know that your community will come, the money will come, and opportunities will just start to kind of flow in once you really align yourself.
Well, Anicia, you've just given us so many nuggets, pun intended, when it comes to being a chef, transitioning into the food world, supporting kids. So with all this, we are going to do our fun Future Food Is You tradition called the Future Flash 5.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm a little scared.
Don't be. Everyone gets nervous. It's fun. It's fun. I promise you. Okay, here we go. The future of private chefs.
Pop-ups.
The future of culinary school.
Optional.
The future of restaurants.
Non-fussy food.
The future of children's food.
Real food.
The future of food entrepreneurs.
Abundance. I'd like to see more of them.
Amazing. Anicia, thank you again so much for joining us. If we want to keep supporting you, where are the best places to find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Anicia Anya, or you can check us out at kidstableny.com.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we go, our guest is going to leave a voicemail at the Future of Food mailbox, just talking to themselves 10 years from now. You have reached the Future of Food Is You mailbox. Please leave your message after the beep.
Hey girl, hey. It's been a while. 10 whole years. It's been 10 years since you had that crazy idea of launching a kids' food business in your late 20s. Girl, let me tell you, Kids Table is now in stores nationwide, and you were finally able to create that dream of opening a kid-friendly cafe with a team of your dreams. Girl, you did it. I'm so proud of you for deciding that food was it. I hope you're finally able to bask in the joy of feeding your own kids now, and not just the kids of New York City, while living in your Brooklyn brownstone with your lovely partner and attending block parties on Tompkins Ave. And those 2 books you wrote, I hope that the kids are loving them as bedtime stories. I hope you're living life with ease now and less startup stress like I am now. I hope life now has space and time for intimate dinner parties, traveling with friends, and most of all, enjoying a whole Bronzino. I love you. Talk to you soon.
That's it for today's show. Do you know someone who you think is the future of food? Tell us about them. Nominate them at the link in our show notes or leave us a rating and review and tell me about them in the review. I can't wait to read more about them. Thanks to Kerry Gold and Walmart for supporting the show. The Future of Food Is You is a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. Thanks to the team at CityVox Studios, executive producers Carrie Diamond and Catherine Baker, and associate producer Jenna Sadhu. Catch you on the Future Flip.